Hi everyone, welcome to PK Storybox, the place where stories come alive. Every Friday, we bring you a brand new story full of imagination and emotion. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, your next favorite story is waiting. Let's go into the story. The Concealed Pulse, created by Prabhakaran Raghupathy. In the bustling city of Chennai, where the scent of jasmine mingled with the hum of traffic, lived a nurse named Mrs. Giselle Mathew. At 35, Giselle had built a reputation as one of the most dedicated nurses at St. Mary's General Hospital. Her calm demeanor and steady hands had saved more lives than most doctors could count. Every morning, she walked through the hospital gates with a smile that masked her exhaustion. In that white uniform, however, lay secrets few could imagine. Giselle's life was not confined to the fluorescent corridors of St. Mary's. Beyond her regular shift, she lived another life, one of survival, risk, and quiet rebellion. Her colleagues knew her as a compassionate nurse, but no one knew what she did after working hours. The double life began 5 years ago, after the devastating Chennai floods. She had seen people dying not from injury, but from lack of medical access. Children with fevers turned septic because medicine was unaffordable. That helplessness carved something inside her, a resolve to act. So, Giselle began collecting unused medicine from discharged patients. She repackaged them carefully, labeling doses by hand in her small apartment in T. Nagar. At first, it was a modest effort, just a few antibiotics and painkillers. Soon, word spread quietly through the slums near Sidapet. People began visiting her after dark, calling her Sister Angel. She never asked for money, only for honesty about symptoms. The small clinic in her home became a sanctuary for those forgotten by the system. But the secret came with dangers. It was illegal to distribute medicine without a license beyond her professional duties. Yet, Giselle couldn't stop. Conscience weighed heavier than law. Every night, after her hospital shift, she walked home through narrow streets carrying medical supplies hidden in her lunch bag. Her husband, Matthew, a schoolteacher, knew about her mission but feared for her safety. "You're risking everything, Gigi," he would whisper. "If they find out, you could lose your job, or worse." But Giselle only smiled, saying, "What's the point of being a nurse if I can't heal?" By day, she attended to wealthy patients in air-conditioned wards. By night, she stitched wounds under candlelight in her living room. Her medical notebook was filled with handwritten prescriptions and stories of survival. One of her earliest patients was a boy named Arul, with a snake bite and no money for antivenom. Giselle used her contacts to smuggle a vial from the hospital's surplus stock. Arul survived, and his mother brought her flowers every year after that. Another night, an old fisherman arrived with a festering leg wound. The hospital had turned him away due to unpaid bills. Giselle cleaned the wound herself, applying antibiotic ointment with utmost care. Within a week, the infection had subsided, and the man walked again. Stories like these spread through whispers across the city's underbelly. People began seeking her out not just for treatment but for hope. But with attention came danger. One evening, she noticed a man in plain clothes watching her clinic from across the street. Her pulse quickened. Could it be a health inspector? She closed the door early that night and sat in silence, her hands trembling. The next day, she resumed her hospital work as if nothing had happened. But paranoia had crept in, shadowing her every step. A week later, a patient at the hospital recognized her. "Sister, you treated my daughter in Pet," he exclaimed. Her heart stopped. A doctor turned to look. Giselle forced a smile and diverted the conversation. That night, she told Mathew it might be time to stop. But then, a call came, a pregnant woman in distress, trapped in the rain. Giselle grabbed her kid and ran through the monsoon, heart pounding. She delivered the baby in a makeshift shelter, cutting the umbilical cord with sterilized scissors. The baby's first cry reminded her why she couldn't give up. "Every life matters," she whispered to herself. Over time, her secret clinic evolved. She began training local women in basic first aid and hygiene. Together, they became a network of silent healers. They shared leftover bandages, saline bottles, and courage. Giselle became both a nurse and a mentor. One of her students, Mina, once said, "You taught us that medicine isn't just science, it's compassion." Those words became Giselle's guiding light. But bureaucracy was catching up. St. Mary's administration received an anonymous tip about a nurse misusing hospital supplies. An internal audit began. Giselle felt the noose tightening. She erased all traces of her side practice, burned records, hid medicine, and stopped meeting patients for weeks. The silence felt unbearable. Every night, she listened to the city sounds and wondered if she'd done enough. Then, one evening, a child knocked on her door, feverish and barely breathing. She couldn't turn him away. She treated him through the night, monitoring his pulse and temperature. By dawn, the fever broke. But that morning, inspectors arrived at her door. Someone had followed the child there. "Mrs. Mathew, we need to talk about unauthorized medical practice," said the officer sternly. Mathew stood beside her, his face pale. Giselle didn't resist. She looked the officer in the eye and said, "I only did what was right." The news spread across Chennai, nurse arrested for illegal treatment. Social media erupted in her defense. Former patients came forward, sharing stories of how she saved their lives. Journalists called her the Florence Nightingale of the slums. The hospital suspended her, pending investigation. But public sentiment turned the tide. Donations poured in for her legal defense. NGOs and activists rallied, demanding reforms in healthcare access. Eventually, the court released her on humanitarian grounds. Giselle returned home to find flowers and letters waiting at her doorstep. The people she healed stood outside, clapping as she walked in. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she was not alone anymore. Though she couldn't legally reopen her clinic, her students carried on her work. They named their initiative, Giselle Health Collective. The movement spread through Chennai's poorest neighborhoods. Giselle began advising them quietly, training volunteers in safe medical practice. She no longer hid, but she worked smarter, within new boundaries. Her story became part of medical ethics lectures in the city's nursing colleges. She spoke at seminars about compassion beyond rules. Healing, she said once, is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. And as the sun set over Chennai's Marina Beach, Giselle watched children she once saved running along the waves. In that moment, she knew, the secret life she once lived had become a legacy. Thank you all. We would be happy to receive your feedback. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.